We're busy talking with the candidates in various races, and today we're going to talk with one of the candidates for the 10th District Judge race. You'll be making these decisions in just a few weeks, or hopefully sooner than that, and of course making it legit in a few weeks. Jim Lance is with us now, a candidate for the 10th District Judge. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Richard.
Thank you for the time today, sir. So the 10th District Judge post is something you've decided to aspire to. Why?
The 10th District Post is as we like to call it, affectionately, the community court. Yeah. And for me, as a lawyer who lives and works in Battle Creek, there's nothing better than being part of that community, being part of that court, and you really get to be with the citizens and really impact their lives.
When you say community court, talk about what that really means.
Well, we call it the community court because, quite frankly, the type of cases that are traditionally heard there, landlord, tenant, speeding tickets, cases under $25,000, small civil matters. Mm-hmm. Those are cases that are typically found between regular citizens and maybe not necessarily larger businesses and such. So we like to call it the community court. I would also say that a lot of the citizens who appear there appear by themselves, not represented by attorneys. So we like to call it the community court.
So yeah, these are everyday matters that get heard in these chambers. Why do you want to be in this post?
Well, as a lawyer, every day I get to serve individuals, represent them, and help them. The way I look at it is the judge being part of that court, you're no longer serving individuals. Instead, what you're doing is you're serving the community. And I think all of us, it sounds cliche, but all of us have this sense of community and we want to serve it. Mm-hmm. And I can't think of a better way, at least in my profession, than to do that.
What's your experience been?
Overall, I would say the last 11 years I've been practicing in dozen courts across the state. I practiced primarily in district court. However, prior to that, I actually clerked for the Supreme Court. But one of the things that you do when you're practicing in courts, I've representing clients from everything from landlord-tenant to real estate matters to criminal matters to the misdemeanors that you typically hear in the district court. Mm-hmm. So really, the experience level that I have fits nicely with the district court.
You've had experience there on the other side of the bench.
That is correct. I have done more probably defense work than any type of prosecution. That is correct.
Jim Lance is here, candidate for 10th District Judge, and we'll continue in our discussion coming up in a moment on WBCK. We're here with Jim Lance, candidate for 10th District Judge. Of course, the little background on this post is that this is the judgeship that was once held by Judge Hallisey, who's now in the circuit court. He made that move by way of appointment midterm, and so there was an appointment made by the governor to finish the Hallisey term in the district court. So now we hit the reset button here at this election, and the voters will choose the next judge. So what considerations do you have to make, Jim, do you think, when you decide, okay, I'm going to change my hat and become a judge and not necessarily be a lawyer representing one side or another?
It's primarily advocacy. In private practice, we advocate for clients, we advocate for positions, and we're trying to either convince the third-party judge or, of course, the opposition of our position. With respect to the trying to switch the hat to becoming that impartial judge, mm-hmm. Now you're taking in both sides of the story, trying to weigh the each side fairly and trying to render a decision, not having per se a dog in the race, if you will, right. And trying to render a clear, coherent, and efficient decision to the parties. Unfortunately, I would say a lot of parties go to court and they're looking for justice. And what I tell people, court is not about justice. Court is about a process. Justice is the process itself. You may not like the decision that you ultimately get, but as long as the process itself was fair and you had your opportunity, then you had your justice. And as a judge, when I think about that, that's one of the things that I want to aspire to, and certainly changing your hat, if you will, that's something that I want to continue.
Is there a particular challenge in doing that, the impartiality balance?
Well, I think obviously as it's human nature for us to have some sort of bias, if you will, when we hear something, particularly with the sensationalism of stories that we see in the news or in the newspaper or YouTube or on the internet. What we need to do, it's kind of like an athlete when they go play their sport. When you walk in between the lines, you have to shut out all that outside noise and focus on the event itself. As a judge, once you put on that black robe, you have to walk through that courtroom. It's lack of a better phrase, it's game time. Outside of the courtroom, sure, you can change and be part of the community. But when you're inside that in that courtroom, there is no bias anymore, and you have to be as impartial as you possibly can, and you need to focus strictly on those issues.
That's hard to do, isn't it? I mean, for the average person, I mean, especially now in a world where we see things through our own lenses, we accuse people of seeing things through other lenses. We spend a lot of time being on one side or another, and what you're saying is you've got to be almost a superhero here and shut all that out.
Yeah, and again, it isn't something that's simple. Fortunately for me, as a in the district court, in addition to the community court, we also like to refer to it as a statutory court because a lot of decisions that you're rendering are statutory in nature. The bottom line is, if you get an ordinance violation, for instance, it's fairly black and white as to the ordinance. You might have a good reason why you had something, but it's a pretty straightforward reason. Same for speeding tickets or of that nature, or not paying rent if you have a landlord-tenant matter. I would say the ability for the impartiality is kind of built in with respect to the type of cases that you get, simply because they're more statutory in nature, as opposed to the circuit court, which has more equitable functions, and there's where I would say bias could certainly lead into some things.
So what you're saying is that the district court, it might be simpler in many cases to apply the law.
That is exactly what I'm saying, because again, it's more statutorily based with respect to the type of claims and cases and issues that you're deciding as the impartial judge, if you will.
What do you suppose would be a common challenge in the district court for a judge, and how would you handle that?
I think common challenges for judges, from the practicing perspective, is getting out decisions in an efficient and coherent manner. We have decisions in the district court that impact, as I said, the community at large, and a lot of the people who come before the court need resolution of those cases, so that they can either move on with their life or decide what course of action is best based on that decision. So any delays in the decision making process certainly impacts that decision making by the individual. So I think as a district court, you really want to be efficient and really timely with respect to the opinions that you and decisions that you ultimately decide.
We're talking with Jim Lance, who is a candidate for judge in the 10th District in Calhoun County. A few more minutes in that regard in just a moment. A few more minutes with Jim Lance, candidate for 10th District Judge here in Calhoun County. You've been in Battle Creek a while, have you?
Yeah, I've been living here for the past decade, just a little over a decade. I grew up in Bay City, and how I got to Bay City, well, as some of the citizens who met me on the campaign trail have learned, my story doesn't begin in Michigan. Instead, it actually begins in Vietnam. I was found on a road abandoned when I was roughly 2 to 3 months old by an American GI who took me to a hospital, thankfully. And the family that I grew up, who ended up adopting me, they had 4 children, and their youngest son died of SIDS when he was about 6 months old.
Oh, wow.
And so ultimately what they wanted to do is they wanted to have 4 children, and so they went through an adoption agency, a Christian adoption agency, and there they found me, and I moved here. I came from Vietnam when I was about 26, 25 months old, and have lived in Michigan ever since.
Wow, what a story, Jim.
Well, every time I go out and speak in front of groups and I see veterans around, what I find really amazing is when I tell them that story, I can, the veterans will come up to me and they'll hug me and I which I find amazing, because it's me who is very thankful to them. Without them, my story, like I said, doesn't begin. And for them to come up to me and show me such generosity, as I say, it's all me who should be thanking you, and particularly this day and age.
Well, that is an incredible story. So, as we alluded, the 10th District Judge post was vacated early, and so there was an appointment made by the governor, which is typical course in cases like this. I want to give you a chance to talk about that a little bit, because your opponent is that appointee. So is it, well, there could be a person out there who says, well, the governor chose that person. That must be a good choice. Talk about that and why you think you're a better choice.
Sure. When I look at the appointment process, I think a number of our attorneys have applied through it. In fact, I even applied through the process itself. The governor makes his decisions, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. They make their appointment. So with respect to this particular race, one of the reasons why I'm running is I think that the people of Calhoun County deserve to make a decision. Win, lose, hopefully win. I think the people of Calhoun County need to elect their officials, and so that's the opportunity that they have in this particular election. The governor chose the appointee, who's from Marshall, and of course I'm running and I'm from Battle Creek. We look at the court and we want it to be reflective of our community, and I would just say that being from Battle Creek, being from Marshall, being Albion, every community kind of has its own unique, I would say, vibe to it, and so. That's what we're going to give. We're going to give the citizens of Calhoun County an opportunity to make a decision.
We talked about this with one of the other judge candidates. In other races, of course, you have a party affiliation, and talk about looking through lenses. People can apply whatever litmus test they want to based on what party affiliation. Of course, in the judge candidacies, there are no party affiliations, and so a person has to try and figure out the differences between the candidates. Does it concern you that it might require more work on the part of a voter to figure this out? Absolutely.
When you being on the campaign trail, when you speak to voters, quite frankly, they have very little knowledge as to who the judges are, let alone how many judges we have, and the roles and functions of our court system. Having that ability to explain to them who I am, what the court is about, really provides a nice template, if you will, an educational opportunity for that. But at the end of the day, there are, with as much media out there, with citizens guides, we certainly have had a lot of, I would say, written questions and written responses to provide as much access to us as possible, so they can learn a little bit more about us. Even taking part of of your show like today, it's another opportunity to have access to a voter who doesn't know me, who hasn't met me.
Right.
And so but to your basic question, yes, it is a little difficult, because there's quite frankly a number of candidates, not just judges alone, but there's a number of candidates out there that we know very little about. I think I looked at the ballot the other day, and quite frankly, not to criticize the Michigan regions, but I really don't know any of the people who are running for Michigan region.
Yeah.
And it would be my role, my job as a voter, to go do some research before I make that ultimate decision.
All right, and there you have it. Jim Lance, candidate for 10th District Judge in Calhoun County. We appreciate the time you've given us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Best of luck.